Hi everyone, thought I would continue with the project. So that is one round down, 10 to go. This is going to take a long time. As I decided in this round, I will not show Gwen Jones's draw with Dave Ledger, which is a massive shock of course, because Dave Ledger is an FM and Gwen Jones is a 2600 plus Grandmaster. Where basically he played his dragon again, which he pasted in with no shields last year to win it. But this time, ending the draw where Jones had to take the Perpetual, already lost. I've been a pawn down for nothing in endgame. And he went in the commentary room afterwards and showed it. Because I had that quick win, as you may remember, in round 2 in like an hour and a half, so I went to the commentary room for a bit. But yeah, round 2, I'm going to show you David Howell for the first time, the 2639 GM. And he was playing Jack Rudd, who, despite only being 2280, is an IM, and he's very good. He just has a habit of playing a bit too fast. Usually having more time than he started off with, which is obviously not very good against strong Grandmasters. But I don't think he can help it, to be fair. Now Howell has a habit of using a lot of different openings with white, like Jones does, because it avoids prep. And these top Grandmasters can, as you say, can punch you either hand. They can play E4 and D4 and C4 and Nf3 and G3 and B3 and A3 and all that. Which is very good. And this could be an interesting game, this, because Jack Wood is capable of beating strong players. And he's very good, very strong tactically. Howell was white and opened with D4. And Rudd plays E6. So he's inviting a potential French defence, but sadly we do not get one. Instead we get C4. So the game will remain in D4 territory. C5 was played, D5, ED5, CD5, and D6. So we now have Benoni. If Black plays Bxd5, then interestingly enough we have the Snake Benoni where Black's bishop like wriggles to C7 to A5. D6 is played. Nice C3. G6, and it's not quite a modern Benoni yet because Black's knight's not gone to F6, and it actually goes to E7 in game. What I was going to say is, in this project I'll be probably covering about 20 to 25% of the actual overall games, but you never know, Brandon might return sometime and do a few videos on some games as well, so we might even get more games. But I've done most of the good ones. I mean, maybe he might do Jones v Ledger, but I don't think it's a particularly great game. It's all like theory, it's all a game and ends in a draw. Like, it's not that exciting. It's an exciting finish, but it's on most of the game's theory. I thought this game was more interesting. And plus, I don't want to show the same players over and over again. I want to give other players a chance. And plus, as well, because I'm making sure I cover every player at least once, even the whipping boys. I need to. And I don't want to do mega amounts of games. I need to make sure I need to like cut a few games off the top few boards. Nf3 Bg7, Bishop F4. So Howell is employing a line which in the line in Kaufman's, where the point is you play E3 and Bishop F4 rather than playing E4, because these Kaufman's theory is that the pawn in E4 is actually a target on the semi-open E file, whereas if you put the pawn in E3 you can keep it protected by the F pawn. And plus as well, it's more flexible because you maintain the option of playing E4 and trying to blast Black away with E5. Now this isn't quite fully a modern Benoni because the knight is on F6 rather than E7, but some positional features of this position are: White has more space in the central pawn majority. White's main breaks are B4 and E5. Black has a queenside pawn majority and we're looking to advance that, and Black will get good chances in endgames as a result. White will usually play A4 to restrain it. Black's bishop, unlike in the King's Indian, has an open diagonal. But of course, White's pawn centre is a lot more fluid, so overall this is a much more risky opening. Black also has plans of playing bishop G4 and swapping his bishop off for the knight in F3 and getting the knight to E5 and getting good control of the dark squares. White has plans to play knight F3 to D2 to C4 to pressure Black's backward D6 pawn. This is a very risky opening for Black, very aggressive and suits Jack Rudd's style. But maybe not the best against very strong players. Now in this position, black would like to play bishop g4 and try and get his bishop off of white's knight, but the problem is b7 becomes chronically undefended, and queen a4 check is actually very awkward. With knight blocks, you've got stuff like, well, actually you can play knight d2 anyway, so, and get out of the way of the bishop and then put knight to c4 and put more pressure on d6. And if bishop back to d7, then you just play queen back to b3, which is very awkward for black to defend this pawn. So black castles instead to get out of the way of queen a4 check, and white plays bishop e2, because he wouldn't want to, the last thing white wants is to get his f3 swapped off of black's light square bishop. Then his grip on e5 square will be reduced, and he can't do the knight d2 to c4 manoeuvre, which is very typical of the Benoni and one of the strongest plans because it aims at the d6 point. H6 was played, so Rudd begins a very aggressive plan of taking advantage of the fact that his knight is on e7 rather than f6, and he will play g5 and f5 and try and attack white's king. h3 to stop any bishop g4, a6 threatening b5, so white stops it with the typical Benoni restraining move. g5, a very risky move, bishop h2, f5. So Rudd is not scared of his opponent and he's going for the throat, but I think this is a little bit weakening. Knight d2, beginning the plan of rerouting. Knight comes into g6, and now queen c2, which just develops the queen, and maybe white could even consider castle along in this position and trying to peel open files towards black's king, but I think that's a bit dodgy. Knight e5. And now white makes a very interesting decision. One move to consider is just to play a5. The point is if black ever gets b5 in, because black will usually try and support it with like rook b8 and bishop d7 just to get it in, then when white takes en passant against b5, then the a6 pawn will be very weak and an open file. And also white can consider playing, if he can defend his a5 pawn, he can consider playing knight a4 to b6 and then put his other knight on c4, and white will be positionally winning. But bishop takes e5 was played instead, which looks very dodgy. It's not a move I would even consider, because I am the opposite end of David Howell in the chess playing strength league. But the point of it is, although it weakens the dark squares, that knight was very strong of black's, and also black's pieces are undeveloped on queen's side, so it's actually quite logical in a way. Bishop takes e5, because d takes e5 would not be good because it gives white a dangerous pass pawn. Bishop e5 now, knight c4 with tempo, and black decides to let his bishop drop potentially and get pieces into game, but now a5 is played, again with the plans mentioned earlier. So he plays something like rook b8 and tries to force b5 and then just take en passant. Queen e7 was played, white castles because he didn't want the queen on the e file against his king. Bishop goes back to g7, rook a1, white's just got a very nice positional advantage. Black's two bishops are meaningless in this position. Rook b8, trying to force with b5, knight a4, very nice move, trying to get a horsey into b6, knight e5, knight f4, which maybe is not quite the best. Boots the knight away from its position, but allows piece swaps, and white has more space and wants to keep pieces on. And also you don't want to move pawns in front of your king, and it weakens the e3 pawn potentially. Maybe just knight a b6 was better, removing the knight from the rim. If knight c4, play bishop c4, and now a black knight can never get into e5. And after knight a b6, it's just difficult for black. A move from black, he probably has to take it actually. And then maybe bishop d7, and white should just play something like move the bishop in this dodgy square, put pressure on the f5 point. It's very good for white. But f4 isn't interesting. Knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, and now b5, which forces white's hand because otherwise his pieces are fought. A b6 en passant. That's a pawn sack actually, to try and get some counterplay. Is there any good alternatives? Maybe rook f7, just waiting. Just knight to b6. So the point of b5 is it stops that. Yeah, so b5 destroys the b6 outpost, is what I think I was saying earlier. So a b6 en passant. So Ep at the end. G4, very aggressive follow up, but very bad follow up. Instead, maybe Black should just get his king off this diagonal or something, but G4. Because now, what does Howell play next? Pause the video. Knight takes c5, which of course the knight is immune due to d6 check winning the queen, and he could have tried g takes h3 to mix it up, but instead something like knight e6 then is very good. Say hg2, queen g2, bce6, de6, rook b6, simply b3. White's not a pawn up, but White's got a very nice position with his pieces are very active and a very dangerous pawn at e6. And Black's got pawn weaknesses all over the board. Rook b6 was tried instead. b3, simply protecting the bishop, moving the pawn from attack. gh3, and now Howell does not take back. He plays instead g3 to keep lines closed against his king, but this is actually not the best move. Stronger was to play the knight into e6, because h takes g2 isn't really a threat, because Black hasn't got any pieces to support the attack with. So he plays this. We get a line similar to the other one I just mentioned before. g3 was played though, because again, that still a decent move, queen c7. Now the knight comes into e6, and due to the threats against his fianchettoed bishop around his king and his rook, Black is practically forced to play e6, which allows a dangerous pawn. And d5 is played, which seems to win the pawn, but now comes the point e7. Black takes, bishop takes d5 check, king moves, and now king h2, just to blockade this pawn for good. And again it's equal material, but White's much better. But it is bishop's opposite course, so if we get to an endgame, there might be a shock on the cards. h5. White can actually safely play king takes h3 and go a pawn up, but in bishop's opposite color positions, pawns don't matter so much, so White goes for initiative instead. Queen e2, threatening the pawn, h4, trying to smash open lines. Rook g1, rook d8, bishop c4, but this seems stronger. After rook a6, just take this pawn. But bishop c4 is played instead. Rook bd6, queen f3, takes, rook takes, and now rook a6 practically has to be played. After rook takes h3, rook dd6, and maybe this is not too bad, but White can play rook g1 and get maybe g5 attack. Instead he throws his tempting check in. The king moves back. Rook e2 was stronger, and now rook 8d6, which is a complete blunder. Probably for playing a bit too fast. Well, quite a lot too fast, because he probably had more time than he started off with. But even after the better move of, say, bishop h6, White will then end up a pawn up with a good position. But if the rook ad6, White just wins with check. After the bishop blocks this check, and that just went to f8 bishop for nothing, and Black has no follow up, so Black resigned. So quite a nice game by White there, reducing Black's counterplay, getting positional trumps, nuances, and ended up with a nice attack in the end, winning the piece. So very instructive, and I hope you enjoyed this game, and please leave in the comments some thoughts. Thanks very much.